Welcome to Angry Appliance Repair Person. For the record, you're looking at him. This presentation that we are going to discuss is going to be about the infamous water filter. Now, the water filters in refrigerators always confuse a lot of homeowners. They see that little light come on the display and says, whether it turns red or yellow, whatever, and it says, hey, you better change the water filter or I'm going to break. That is not true. Not true at all. Companies want you to buy more water filters, so therefore they make more money. There is no reason to change the water filter until it is needed. Most companies will put in their use and care guide, it will tell you that it is a reminder to change the filter. You do not have to replace it. They are reminding you not to forget about the filter. That is the most important thing. Because if you leave the filter in too long, yes, you could have a failure where you get no ice out of the ice maker or no water out of the door if you have water in the door. So I want to help you figure out for the refrigerator in your house when you are going to need to change the filter. So there are two ways to tell. It's going to depend on what model of refrigerator you have. Some refrigerators have just an ice maker only, no water. Some have both. So if you have an ice maker only, no water, you have to look at the size of the cubes. An ice maker needs to fill at a certain rate with a certain time. So you have a certain amount of time to fill the ice maker. And once that ice maker fills with water, it will dump the cubes once it freezes. Now, if the water pressure is too low because your water filter is getting clogged, if you take your bin out and put it on the floor, or table, and you notice that the ice cubes some of them look correctly, where the ice cube is a nice size, you put it in your hand and you cannot crush it. But then if you see a mixture of ice cubes where some of them look very, very good and some of them you put in your hand and you can crush it, there is no density to the cube, it's time for a filter. That means that the filter is clogging up and it no longer will allow enough water to come into the ice maker when it needs it. Now, when you have a water dispenser, that makes life a little easier, I admit that. And when you have a water dispenser, you can actually just tell by dispensing water into the glass. And if you're thinking, boy, this is taking a long time to dispense in my glass, then you know that the filter is getting slow. Don't call a serviceman. That just means that the filter is clogging up. Now, depending on the quality of your water filter and your water, that will determine how long you need to keep it in. Sometimes, like myself at my house, I can leave the water filter in for 2 years because my water is pretty good. I have filters on my plumbing. So therefore, I actually have good water pressure coming in, and it can last up to 2 years before I need to change it because the flow coming out of my door is not slow at all. So I do not recommend that you leave the filter in longer than 2 years. 2 years is long enough. Then you should replace that filter. Even if you think that everything is okay, I would still change it. Every once in a while, I see one where there is a carbon packet in the filter. And the carbon packet, if that breaks, you will have all these black little dots in your ice and in your water. And depending on the model of your refrigerator, it is not something that you can actually fix because you can't clean those tubes, or sometimes you cannot replace those tubes. So I would not leave it in longer than 2 years. 2 years is maximum in my opinion. I would basically leave it in for 2 years as long as you don't notice a problem with water coming out or ice cubes being too small that you can crush them. Now, the type of water filter what is that, smartest man in the house? What did I forget to say? Oh, yes, you're right. You are correct. I'm sorry. Certain models have what's called a flow meter. Now, if your model has a flow meter, which I'm not saying it does or doesn't, only certain brands have them. The flow meter actually counts how many gallons of water you use in your door and in your ice maker. Most brands do not have that feature. Most brands just basically use the computer to figure out time. So it goes off in approximately 6 months. If your light approximately goes off in 6 months, then you don't have a flow meter. Just as long as the filter has enough pressure going through it, you're fine. But if it seems to take a year and a half, and then you start to see the indicator, normally that means that it might be time. Now, the indicator, most of the brands have just a light. The ones that have flow meters, a lot of times they will not just have a light. They are the more expensive refrigerators. They will have maybe a picture of a cube, or they'll have something else to try to tell you, hey, you better think about changing this before I start flashing, and then you're going to have a problem. But I've never really had a problem with anyone's filter under 2 years unless you have a water problem. The filters that these companies use are fantastic. They're wonderful filters. I have read the specifications myself, and they take out everything that is in there. They're wonderful, but they're also rather expensive. So that's why 2 years should be maximum in my opinion, but don't replace it under 2 years as long as everything looks okay. Now, there will be certain people that have wells that they're on their water, and their water is so full of something, I don't know, sediment maybe, and it fills up the filter very quickly. I have had homeowners that have actually paid me to come out to the house after they replaced the filter, and 3 months it was too slow coming out of the door. They thought the refrigerator was broken. It was not broken. It was 3 months, and then whatever was in their water clogged the filter. It happens. So that's why I agree that the light serves a purpose by reminding you, but it doesn't mean you have to run out to the store and you have to get a filter right away. Now, the type of filter that you buy and this is a perfect example of what I'm about to say. Some people like to get on the internet. They want to start a company like we are trying to do. And they are basically wanting to sell you a filter that is not the filter that comes with the unit. I understand that. They want to make a profit by selling you a cheaper filter. So you don't have to spend what could be $60, $70 on a filter from the manufacturer. There is a problem with that. The manufacturer makes a very good filter. Now, I'm not saying that the third-party filter is not also good. It might be, it might not be. But if you are going to buy a third-party filter to try to save money, I would strongly recommend that you ask for, whether it's online or somehow they get it to you, what that filter takes out. Most manufacturers will give you the spec sheet that will tell you what it takes out of the water. So you want to compare the sheet that comes from the manufacturer with the sheet from the third-party filter company to make sure that they are the same. Because if they're not the same, you are buying an inferior filter. And maybe what that expensive manufacturer filter does, you may not need all of that, but you might. And if you do, you want to get that good filter. You do not want to get the inferior third-party filter. Check what they both do to make sure that they are the same. If they are, and you can save yourself 20 or 30 bucks, go ahead, do it. But make sure that it is taking out what you need it to be taken out so you have good, clean water. There is no reason to filter the water twice. Absolutely not. So if you have an expensive water system, whether it's a water softener or a water conditioner in your home, and you have one of these filters in your refrigerator, there is no reason to filter it twice. None. Zero. All you're doing is spending money, even if it is every 2 years. All you're doing is spending money on a filter you don't need. So you can, with most manufacturers, get what is called a bypass. The bypass will replace the filter. So in other words, you take out the filter that's in there and you put in this blank one and then you forget about it. And that filter will never have to be replaced again because you have a bypass in there. So if your water is that good, don't filter it twice. just remove that filter, throw it away, and buy a bypass. Almost every manufacturer either has a bypass you can purchase, or they have a bypass built in. It's easy to tell. Just take the filter out, get a glass, and put it under the water dispenser and see if you get water. If you don't get water, you need a bypass. If you do get water, you don't need a bypass. Take it out, forget about it. Now, if you have an ice maker only, that's a little different. You won't be able to really tell if you need the bypass or if you don't. And you never want to run an ice maker dry, ever. You will ruin it. So, you're going to have to research on your model online if there is a bypass needed or if there isn't. Most manufacturers on their websites will tell you if that model has a bypass that you can purchase, or you don't need one, you just take the filter out. So with an ice maker, it will take a little bit more time. With a water dispenser, it's very easy. Just take it out and see if you get water. But the filter itself serves a very good purpose, I think, as long as you need that. Some people need it, some people don't. But don't buy a filter just because sorry, forgive me for this, the idiot light comes on telling you that, hey, you got to replace this. No, you don't. You just need to make sure that that water filter is not full. That's all. And with watching the water flow come out, making sure the ice is still the same size, they're all the same, looking the same way, you do not need to change the filter. Just don't leave it in longer than 2 years, because you don't want to take a chance on having anything burst inside the filter and having it end up getting all over the place in the water lines, and then it cannot be repaired. Only thing you can do is try to flush it. So remember, do not change the filter when the light goes off. Check it first. And if you need a filter, fine, get one. If you don't, then leave it in there and don't filter your water twice. Check on a bypass if you already have good water and you do not need the filter. Now, for the senile thought this week, I am going to talk about this. This is a light bulb for the people who don't know. This is a light bulb, and I refer to this as the Thomas Edison light bulb. So my senile thought has to do with that light bulb being in 2000 and approximately 2007. I'm going to tell you a little fairy tale that I made up. Some of it is a little made up. Some of it is true. You can check online if you don't believe me. So around 2007, give or take, there was a new law passing that was eliminating our Thomas Edison light bulbs. So it's got people very upset. Everybody was not happy. And we were getting our $1, $2 light bulbs. And at that time, we only had what I call the squarely cube bulb, which is a CFL. At that time, that was really the only replaceable bulb we had. So a lot of people were upset that this bulb was the only bulb that we could buy. We couldn't get our $2, $3 bulb. We had to get this little squirrely cube bulb, or the LEDs were just coming out, and people could get those, but they were expensive at the time. So it was interesting to watch how everyone perceived how these light bulbs were no longer going to be around anymore. So I noticed back then that as in all government laws, they announce them before they usually take effect. They usually give a year or two before they actually go into effect. So they were announcing this in 2009, 2010, 2007, 2008, excuse me, to actually take place in 2010 and beyond, where they would start to eliminate these bulbs and go with a regular, whether it was a squirrely cube bulb, as I call it, or it was an LED. One thing I took notice, and here's where the fairy tale begins. Elephants and donkeys. I'm going to use them as examples just for this conversation. Elephants, which happen to be on the right side of the board, and the donkeys, which happen to be on the left side of the board. Now, the elephants and the donkeys, they normally never agree. They are always fighting. They are always arguing. They're always going back and forth because they have different views. And then there are spokespeople for the elephants and the donkeys, and they usually like to be on that side. And then they argue back and forth about different things. I took notice when these light bulbs were being banned, shall we say, that the elephants and the donkeys and their spokespeople, they were actually getting along. They actually agreed that this was a bad thing. It didn't matter if they were fans of the elephant or they were fans of the donkey. They was getting along, and they were saying, well, this is wrong. This is wrong. In 2009, 2010, they were saying, we want our light bulbs. We do not want our light bulbs to go away. So both sides were actually saying, you know what? The people are mad, and we may have to do this. So believe it or not, they delayed having the light bulbs taken away for a couple years. They still took them away, as you will find today. But they actually delayed it at that time. In my opinion, it was nice to see the elephants and the donkeys agree, because it is rare that they agree. They normally argue back and forth. But over this tiny little $2 light bulb, they actually agreed, because the people, the spokespeople said, hey, this is wrong. You have to do something. And they did. Now, in today's world, you will not find those bulbs anymore. They're pretty much gone. But the LEDs have dropped in price. Since the LEDs have dropped in price, it's not so bad to buy them anymore. So now, people aren't really screaming about it. They're not yelling about it. They're not complaining, because you really don't need to buy the squirrely cube bulb, which I personally don't like. You can buy the LEDs, and they seem to be working pretty well, both in your house and in appliances. But my senile thought is very simple. It was nice to see once that the elephants and the donkeys actually did get along. They didn't really fight that much about this one subject. And guess what? It got delayed until we were able, or whoever was able, I should say, to bring the price down so the LEDs weren't as expensive. Think about it. So, as always, I thank you for spending some of your day with us.